Okay, folks, April Reigne, I want to show you at least the highlights of today's congressional hearing. It's not being covered that much in the news, and it should be because this has been going on. It's been an issue for 5 years. And they are just now, they being Wells Fargo, they're just now getting around to apologizing and kind of, sort of, but I get the feeling not really remedying the situation. So I've taken the highlights of it from today's hearing, which is September 29th. Enjoy.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Luetkemeyer, chairman of our Housing and Insurance Subcommittee.
Today we're here to confront, in my judgment, a total travesty in the financial market. The consumers in this case were failed on all accounts. Their financial institution with whom they trusted their family's finances failed them. The federal regulators who were charged with overseeing their protection failed them. The federal regulators in charge of Wells Fargo failed to stop the ripping off of consumers, and the consumers lost. And slapping a bank with a fine isn't going to make that go away. Only 5% of that fine is going to go back to the consumers who were harmed. Mr. Stumpf, giving back your bonus isn't going to make that go away. More rules and regulations are going to make this go away. Fact is, regulators sat in that bank for years and did nothing. Instead, the institution pushed forward with a whatever it takes approach to meet sales targets, and regulators sat idly by, either oblivious or uncaring of these bad practices, even after they're reported in the news. Wall Street needs to be held accountable, but so does Washington. Just kind of curious, this, as a former bank regulator as well as a banker, this is a really, really disappointing situation for me.
I couldn't agree more.
From the standpoint that I tell people I'm shocked and dismayed. I'm dismayed that the bank allowed this to happen because you did have a culture in place that allowed this to happen, and I'm shocked that regulators sat on their thumbs this long and did nothing. And while you're being fined, which I think is appropriate, the regulators ought to be fined as well. For them to take the fine and keep it is a travesty. They need to be fined as well and let that money go back to consumers because they were asleep at the switch as well. There's so much blame to go around in this, it's unbelievable. A while ago you made the comment that that you have a good culture in your institution, that this shouldn't be happening. Well, Mr. Stumpf, your own testimony says that you're firing 1,000 people a year. 1,000 people a year. The only one way that can happen, and that there's a culture there that allows that to happen year after year after year. There's a laissez-faire approach to what you're doing in your bank. Somewhere along the line, somebody's decided to call a timeout and say, enough is enough. This can't continue. And yet, year after year, you're firing people, trying to hope this thing goes away, and the regulators are watching it and still sitting on their thumbs. These actions must have consequences, and for not only you, but they need to have consequences for the regulators as well.
Thank you for that question, because I want to tell you that we did do things. In 2011, within the business, they moved the compliance or the concern for this issue into a compliance area. By 2012, they were reducing goals and doing more ethics training. By 2013, corporate resources were brought in, and we worked with the OCC. In 2014, more reductions in goals. In 2015, and the OCC also was in 2013. We did our study. This does not represent the culture. In fact, we do an outside company.
I respectfully disagree with you, Mr. Stumpf. I've been in business like this all my life. You can't tell me that when you have to fire people year after year after year after year, that there isn't a problem. Yeah, for a year or two, that's one thing, but 4 or 5 years? Yeah. And this, your own testimony says this. I have another question. I need to go on. I got to talk. In my examining days, I examined a bank one time and found a teller skimming money out of her cash drawer. Took her to the president, and he said, well, she's a good employee. As long as she keeps it to a minimum, I think we're going to be okay. My jaw hit the floor. This reminds me of that situation. As long as they keep it to a minimum, I think we're going to be okay. My comment back to him at that point was, have you reported this to your blanket bond insurance company that has a dishonesty clause on it? Do you have a blanket bond, or do you self-insure?
We have a fidelity bond, and that's why we draw a very bright line. When people do the wrong thing, they
my
cannot
question
be
is,
here.
when did you report this action of your employees to your blanket bond company?
You know, I don't, we have a group that does that, our corporate relations with our legal team, and I can share that. We can have our people get to you, but there's a very bright line.
This is a really, really big question, because if you didn't report that immediately when you found this going on, and you allowed for year after year to have 1,000 people.
We do that.
Your blanket bond company is going to be going bonkers over this. We will have a request for that, and I hope you will answer that.
Okay, we'll work with
Thank
your
you,
team.
Mr. Chairman.